Shalom Aleichem. Look at the Sichas, volume 23, Sicha number 1 for Chukas, which is also a siyum on Masechta Megillah. And the Rabbi begins by teaching us that in Torah and Gemara, a person is compared to the Torah. And this is hinted most explicitly in the Torah itself in a verse in today's Parsha, Zos HaTorah Adam. This Torah is like man. And what are the similarities in Torah and man? First of all, both have a body and a soul. Just like a person has a body and a soul, the Torah has the body, the laws, and the soul, meaning the previous HaTorah, the three deeper levels of Torah, I guess, the soul. Further similarity, both have, just like a body has 248 limbs and 365 veins and arteries and sinews, the Torah has 248 positives, mitzvahs, 365 negative mitzvahs. So there are many similarities. Torah is compared to a person. When we look in the end of Masechta Megillah, we find also similarities between a person and the way they treat the Torah, the way they will be treated. And the Rebbe says this goes in line with this theme. Torah is like a person. So the way you treat the Torah, that's the way you're going to be treated. It's also brought down that, God forbid, when a Torah is burnt or ruined, we bury it like a person. If someone's in the presence of a Torah scroll that is burnt, they have to do rending the garments, just like if they're in the presence of a person passing away. God forbid we lose a loved one, we have to rend our garments. But if we're in the presence of the process of death taking place, there is a custom and a concept that some would say that you would have to rend your garments even if you're not related, because you're in that presence. And that law applies to Torah scrolls. So many similarities. A person is like a Torah is like a person, like a yid. And we're going to see that this spells itself out beautifully in the siyum of Megillah. And what's interesting is, for whatever reason, this comparison and the numerous comparisons between the Torah scroll and a person are very much related to the concept of death, which is really the discussion, the context of today's verse. Zos HaTorah Adam is talking about the concept of the red heifer and death, and also again these laws that a person that you rend your garments for a Torah like for a person, etc. There are a lot of connections. So let's take a look at the closing section of Masechta Megillah. And Rebbe says it's a fascinating siyum. The introduction is that we know the Rebbe takes every word of Torah very seriously. So the Gemara is going to make a statement, and then the Gemara is going to refute it, and going to refute that one. There's going to be 3 or 4 refutations until it comes to its conclusion. And the Rebbe is going to teach us that every one of those suggestions, even the ones that refuted, are part of Torah, because it was said by great sages. Not only that, they actually made it into the Gemara. The redactor of the Gemara, Rav Ashi, kept them in. If they were refuted, why put them in? So clearly, they are relevant, and they have lessons. And the discussion is, I give this class in my community here in Port Washington, and we have some lawyers and doctors. So I said to them, imagine lahavdil. There's an opinion given down by the Supreme Court. There's 9 justices, right? Imagine there's a dissenting opinion. If you're a smart legal mind, you want to know the dissenting opinion too, especially if in the days before it was all political, because great legal minds came up with that conclusion. Even if it may not be the final law, it obviously has wisdom to it. Similarly, if we can envision, a medical board headed up by the Surgeon General, I don't know. Imagine the board of the top medical minds in the country. And again, at a time when there's no politics, just medical opinion. And imagine that board has 3 or 4 different opinions. So even though the final ruling will come down in one particular way, if you're a smart person in the world of medicine, you're going to want to know all the opinions. You're going to analyze all of them. How much more so lahavdil in Torah, where every one of the words of the sages is absolutely true. These are tzaddikim. And therefore, even the opinions that are refuted completely by the Talmud, let alone not just opinions, but they made it into the book. Clearly, they are relevant and they have eternal lessons like any part of Torah. But the Rebbe is the one who takes the time to elaborate on such things. So let's take a look at the end of Masechta Megillah. It concludes with a discussion that whoever holds a Torah beer without the mentala, without the covering, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. A Torah is never to be held beer. We don't touch it with our bare hands. We kiss it always with a talus or with something else. Says the concluding lines of Masechta Megillah, Tractate Megillah, one who holds the Torah bare will be buried bare. You know, in Judaism, it's not even punishments. Everything's tit for tat, only because it's a consequential thing. You held the Torah bare. Remember, the Torah is compared to the person. You're going to be buried bare. That's this Talmudic statement. And then the subsequent Talmudic statement is, what do you mean? You're going to be buried bare? Just because you held the Torah bare now. It doesn't mean that you'll be buried bare in the literal sense. It means that you're going to be bare of mitzvahs. We know mitzvahs are garments for the soul, right? You held the Torah bare, you'll be buried bare, you won't have mitzvahs. You cancel out mitzvahs, or all your mitzvahs. Then the Talmud says, really? You buried, you lose all your mitzvahs because you held the Torah bare? Nah. It further redacts it. This is the opinion of Abaye. You will be buried bare of that mitzvah that you're doing at that time. So you already have three ways to look at the same statement. The statement is, if you're buried, hold the Torah bare, you're buried bare. One way it means literal. One way it means a bare from mitzvahs. And one way is, no, you're bare from that mitzvah. Those are the three opinions in the Talmud. They're not really opinions. This is not even a machloket where each one says something different. There's actually suggestions that are refuted completely. But the Rebbe says, but they're still in the Talmud. And therefore they still have wisdom, infinite wisdom, Torah wisdom. But just to make it more interesting, rather than three, we actually have four approaches. Because this concluding approach was Abaye's approach. Namely, that you're bare from the mitzvah that you're doing at that time. Which mitzvah are you doing at that time? So here we look into Tosfos. And Tosfos has two opinions. So he further splits it. One opinion is when you're holding a Torah, there's two mitzvahs you're doing, the mitzvah of holding a Torah and the mitzvah of learning the Torah. So the first opinion in Tosfos is that what is the message of Abaye? You're bare of the mitzvah of holding the Torah. And the second opinion, you actually you lose the mitzvah of studying the Torah. So now we end up with a total of four opinions on the same statement. You held the Torah bare. What's the consequence? Either you'll be buried bare, number one. Number two, you'll be buried bare, you lose your mitzvahs. Number three, you lose the mitzvah of holding the Torah. You're holding the Torah bare? Not good. So that mitzvah doesn't count. Number four, you lose the mitzvah of studying the Torah, which you're doing, I guess, at that time while you're holding it bare. And the Rebbe is going to show us in this extraordinary, beautiful Sicha. It's not extraordinary because every Sicha is extraordinary. How everything fits in. I'm not doing every detail. I'm sticking to the structure of the general, let's call it the skeleton of the Sicha. And then people, if they want, they could study it more in detail, but just to show the general flow so people don't get lost. That's my main goal usually, and especially in this Sicha. So let me bring up my spreadsheet as per my custom. And the Rebbe says, that these four approaches, you see in the first column, the four Talmudic approaches, are based and they line up with four approaches how we look at a Torah covering. In Hebrew, mitzpachas ha-sefer Torah. What is the significance of a mitzpachas, of the covering? What is it? What's its level of value? What's its level of import? So we have four levels, four ways to look at it. One way is the covering is not important at all. The mentala, the mitpachas, the beautiful cloth, which, by the way, in Jewish communities, traditionally, they make them beautiful, right? And they sew them up. And in the Sephardic traditions, let alone it's silver and gold and etc. But what is the significance? What is it about, that covering? How important is it? So level one would say it's not really important at all. It's only there for the person to be able to hold it. The Torah itself doesn't need it. The Torah is a Torah in its full glory without the covering. Why do you need a covering? So that the person can hold it. Since it's disrespectful for a person to hold a Torah without its covering, you need a covering. But not that the Torah needs a covering. And therefore, according to this approach, if you didn't take it out of the Aron Kodesh, if you left it in the ark, you don't need a covering. Torah is fine and perfect with all of its glory inside the ark, no covering. Person wants to take it out, he needs a covering. So it's almost for the purpose of the person, but it has no Torah significance, let's call it. Level 2 will be that no, it's not just for the person, it's also for the Torah. But it's not about the Torah, it's respect for the Torah. It's not really a Torah thing. The Torah is the scroll and the words, but the covering, it adds respect to the Torah, and therefore it's important, and not just important for outside users, it's actually important for the Torah itself. A third way will be that this is actually significant and it becomes part of the Torah. It becomes part of the Torah. But what do you mean? It's only a covering. There's no words, there's no message. Well, there's parts of the Torah scroll that also have no message, and they're required. For example, the margins. By halacha leMoshe miSinai, laws taught to us by Moshe from Sinai, we know that there has to be margins around the pages, and there has to be a certain margin on top and on bottom. These are requirements. Some of them are binding requirements. Nothing is said on the margins, and yet it's obvious that those margins are part of the Torah scroll, and they're not some kind of ancillary outside detail, giving the Torah, complementing the Torah. It's part of the Torah. Similarly, according to this approach number 3, the Torah coverings is part of the Torah. A Torah has a covering, just like a Torah has margins and it has the actual scroll and the words and it has the Eitz Chaims. It has the cover. It's part of a Torah. Now it's a whole new level. It's not just so that I can use the Torah. It's not just to respect the Torah. It is the Torah. But then in that itself, remember, there were 2 ways to learn it. The higher way of learning it, it's not just part of the actual Torah, but it is part and parcel of Torah's message. You see, there's a difference. You could be holding the physical Torah, but when do you really access Torah? When you open, you read it, and you have the message, the learning of Torah, the spirit of Torah. That we're not saying in level number 3. How does the covering give a spirit of Torah? It's just a covering. But it's part of the physicality of Torah. Yes, that I get. Level 4 says no, being that it's part of Torah. This would probably say the same thing about the margins. Because it's part of Torah, and Torah's theme and spirit and purpose is the study and everything in it, they now become part of it too. This is the 4 ways to look at it. People in my community, when we taught the class, they pressed me. They wanted me to give them examples in our life. So I said, level 1, what would be 4 examples of things related to a person? The most external thing is my clothing. They're not me. The next level would be my behaviors. My behavior is also not me, but my behavior reflects me. You want to know what kind of person I am? Look at my behavior. My clothing is meaningless. I can change it. I can borrow it tomorrow from somebody else. It doesn't necessarily reflect me. It's only for others. But when it talks about my behavior, that actually reflects me. What would be 3 and 4? 3 would be the body. I'm just using this as an analogy. The body's not the real you either. You're the soul. But the body is part of you. It's not just for others to be able to see you like your clothing, and it's not even a reflection of you like your behaviors. It is actually you. Thank you very much. Without your body, you're not going to be around very long. Even though it's not the deepest essence of you, it's not your soul, but it's part of you. And number 4 would be the argument that the body is actually a reflection of the soul's essence. Or you might say a body part on which the life is dependent. And that would be a different level, different way to look at the body. The body actually reflects soul. So now, based on these 4 approaches, the way we look at a Torah cover, from the most external to the most integral, and we're comparing it to 4 approaches, 4 levels of the way a person is vis-a-vis the outside world, the parts of them that are more external and more internal till they're integral. So now the Rebbe says that's the 4 levels of the Talmud. Person holds the Torah covering, the Torah without his covering. The first approach is he's buried bare. Because remember, on this level, the Torah covering is like clothing. It's external. It's only for other people, like your clothing. If you're alone, you don't necessarily need clothing. And therefore, in Torah, any punishment is not really a punishment, it's a consequence. You treated the Torah with the lack of appreciation for its clothing, you lose your clothing, God forbid, at the time of burial, which is when, I guess, when it comes down to it. The higher level is no. You don't just lose your clothing, you lose your mitzvahs. Because mitzvahs represent spiritual clothing. The physical clothing is extraordinarily external. It's meaningless. And because it's only clothing to your body, and that's not really the real you. Your mitzvahs, that's the garments to your soul. The mitzvahs are the spiritual reflection of your soul, of the real you. And therefore, on level 2, when the person holds a Torah bear, and on this level, we understand that the Torah covering is a Torah's respect. It's still not the Torah, but it's a Torah's respect. It's spiritually connected to Torah, just like mitzvahs are spiritually connected to a person, and they're also connected to Torah. You might say mitzvahs are the garment of the Torah and the garment of the person, of the Jew. It's a real reflection of what's inside of the Torah itself and of the soul itself, and therefore that would be level 2. He's not just buried bare without clothing, big deal. No, he's buried, his soul is now bare. It's a big deal. He loses his respect, he loses his garment of his soul. But still, by level 2, it's still not something that's integral to you. Comes along level 3 and says, a Torah covering is actually part of the Torah. The Torah is made up of parts. There's the scroll, and there's the lettering, and there's the margins, and the Eitz Chayims, and there's the covering. That's all part of a Torah. They all get the holiness of a Torah, and they become, let's call it, one unit, Torah. And if that's the case, what's the consequence of disrespecting that, of ignoring that connection? That you lose the mitzvah, not just the general mitzvahs. You lose the specific mitzvah of holding the Torah. Person who's holding the Torah, it's a mitzvah. However, being that he's holding the Torah without its cover, and the cover is part of Torah, he loses the mitzvah of holding Torah. He loses the mitzvah of holding Torah. And that becomes already level 3. That's only true once the covering is actually part of the Torah. If the covering is not part of the Torah yet, so I'm holding the Torah. You're telling me I don't have the cover, so there's an external problem. But to say that I lose the mitzvah of holding the Torah, I'm holding the Torah, I'm just not holding the covering. No, on this level of I'm holding a Torah without a covering, I'm not holding a Torah. I'm not holding a complete Torah. In my analogy, you're holding a soul without a body. That's a shtickle problem. You're not holding the person. However, on this level, you still get the mitzvah of studying Torah. I'm holding the Torah and I'm reading from it. So I'll grant you on level 3 that you lose the mitzvah of holding Torah because the Torah includes the covering and you're not holding the covering. You don't have the mitzvah of holding Torah. But what does the covering have to do with Torah? That's already a stretch. The covering is part of the thing called Torah, but it's not part of the Torah's message. There's no message in it. And therefore, but when we come to level 4 and we say no, level 4 is that the Torah covering is actually part of everything about the Torah, not just the physical Torah. It's an outside piece, but it's become part of it. Like my example, a body is to a soul. The body becomes souled. New word. The body becomes alive like the soul, and therefore the body and soul become inseparable. And if you affect the body, you affect the soul. The famous saying, if the body is not okay, the soul is certainly not okay. On that level, I'm missing the covering to the Torah. I'm lacking in Torah and all of its departments, including and especially the actual Torah study. And that would mean that I'm actually losing the mitzvah of Torah study. And that's the 4th opinion in the Talmud. So now suddenly all these 4 things, just to remind you, there were 3 opinions, but level 3, the 3rd opinion was split into 2 by Tosfos. This is not just, an argument, The people in my community always laugh at me. The Torah, they can't agree. They always come with another opinion, and that's what makes it interesting. This is Torah. This is Tedas Emes. It's holy. It's perfect. It's written by Tanoim and Amiroim and Rishonim, and comes along our Rebbe, our holy Rebbe, and shows us how this argument, which seems to be strange. You hold the Torah beer, you buried beer. No, you buried beer from mitzvahs. No, you buried beer from that mitzvah of holding Torah. No, you buried beer from the mitzvah of learning Torah. Like, what do they want? What do they want? They're teaching you 4 different relationships of the coverings of the Torah to the Torah. And therefore, 4 different relationships of the person, consequences of the person who is disregarding that respect and that covering, and how deeply it will affect them. Suddenly this comes alive. You might be saying, but okay, it's all nice and good, but why are we so excited about this? So we won't hold the Torah without its covering. Why do we need to know all these details? So we're going to see the Rabbi at the end of the Sicha applies a spiritual lesson to this in a minute, which really brings it home and explains that you and I are challenged in a spiritual sense that we ought not to hold the Torah beer, and we're going to see in a minute that personal application. But for now, just on the scholarship level, how everything fits so perfectly with various approaches to this covering. But before we go to that ending and that beautiful lesson, to analyze a little bit again the 3 and 4. Why is it that if we go according to approach 3, remember both 3 and 4, this is going to be an interesting analysis. Both 3 and 4 believe that the coverings of the Torah is part of the Torah. And yet, however, one holds it just part of the thing called Torah. Let's call it the physical Torah, the actual Torah. And one says that it's actually part of the essence of Torah. All right, it seems like a small difference, but the halacha will become the application, the consequence will be huge. That in level 3, I lose the mitzvah of holding Torah, but not the mitzvah of learning Torah. In level 4, I lose the mitzvah of learning Torah as well. Why? So the Rebbe analyzes this in a beautiful way. I brought up almost the same screen, but I just added by 3 and 4 explanation. Okay, so if you look at 3, that if you hold that the covering is part of the actual Torah, and you held it without the cover, so you lose the mitzvah of holding the Torah. I'm sorry, mitzvah of Torah study counts. And doesn't count. I apologize for my interruption. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is what it comes down to, right? That's what we just learned. What's the way 3 and 4? Which 3 and 4, I guess, is the Talmudic conclusion. It's Abaya. It's just which way in Tosfos do you go? So if you hold that it's part of the actual Torah, so you lost the mitzvah of holding the Torah. But you didn't lose the mitzvah of Torah study. It's part of the actual Torah, but it's not part of the essence, the soul of Torah. Whereas if on the level 4, you actually lose you actually lose the mitzvah of Torah study as well. Where do we get that difference? So the Rebbe has an interesting application, an example that he brings from halacha, which is just interesting. If you look on the right side of the screen, and here's the analysis. What happens when I do a mitzvah and at the same time there's a sin, or I do a sin which brings about a mitzvah? I mean, everyone knows mitzvah haba ba'avera, a mitzvah that's done with an avera, it's a problem. Well, let's assume it was by accident. Let's assume you didn't know, whatever. So we find 2 halachas. In one case, it counts, and one it doesn't, which the Rebbe brings in the Sicha. The case that he brings that it counts, God forbid a person loses a loved one, they have to do a mitzvah of tearing a garment, rending the garments. What happens if they didn't realize it's Shabbos, or they didn't realize the law, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos, and they rend the garments on Shabbos? It's a prohibition. They have to do tshuva. Even if it's by accident, it's a prohibition, no question. But the question is, when Shabbos night comes, do they have to take another garment and tear it? Or did they already accomplish that halacha that you have to tear the garment? The answer is you don't have to do it again. It's done. Even though it was a sin. It's an interesting thing. There's a sin that took place. He rendered his garments on Shabbos. No good. You got to do tshuva. We got that. But it's done. It still counts. But then we have another example, an opposite example. If I steal matzah and I eat it, I didn't do the mitzvah. Now, why is it different? In both cases, I did a sin, I did a mitzvah. Let's assume he didn't know that it was stolen, or he didn't know that he's not supposed to steal, or he had a senior moment, and obviously he feels bad about it. But the bottom line is, in the case of the rending a garment, he did a sin. He rented his garments on Shabbos. It counts after the fact. He stole the matzah and he ate it after the fact. He's got to eat mother matzah. It's like he ate crackers. It doesn't count. A hill of beans. What's the difference? So this is a discussion. The Rabbi brings it down. It's discussed in the Gemara. And the analysis is that in the case of rending the garment, you see there's a way to split this into two parts, the person's action and the result. His action was a prohibited action. He tore the garment. No good. Terrible. But the torn garment, the result of his action, is now bona fide. There's no sin of owning a torn garment. There's a sin of creating a torn garment if it's Shabbos. Got it. So he did a sin. There was a sin in the action. He's got to do tshuva for that. But at the same time, the result of that action, namely a torn garment, is not a sin. It's a torn garment. And now that you need the mitzvah of torn garment, God forbid, there's dugadak for shiva, he has it. So you could maintain the prohibition and the mitzvah because they're separated in some fashion. They're not, even though they're connected, they resulted. One is a result from the other, but one is the action and one is the result of the action. However, the stolen matzah, there's no way to separate it. You have a matzah, it's stolen, it's treif. There is no matzah. Stolen matzah is not a matzah. You can't separate it. The action and the result is one and the same, and therefore it becomes invalid. This is an interesting analysis. The Rebbe touches upon it briefly, but the Rebbe says it's explaining to us how to think about these two analyses. And it's not just because Torah is punishing you more because you're a thief. There's a thought process here. And that is whether or not the two, the good and the bad of that behavior, of that activity, are able to be separated out. In the case of the rending the garments, they can, separating the action from the result. And in the case of stealing the matzah, now you have a stolen matzah, you can't separate it. And therefore, it's totally invalid. Says the Rebbe, this is a beautiful little piece of Chakira, a little piece of the Rebbe's halachic analysis in the middle of the Sicha. This will explain the difference between 3 and 4. The two opinions of the Taisus. That a guy holds a Torah bear. One opinion is he loses the mitzvah of holding the Torah, and one is he loses even the mitzvah of learning the Torah. So according to level 3, we hold that you hold the Torah bear. That's prohibited. So you lose the mitzvah of holding the Torah. But why should you lose the mitzvah of Torah study? Remember, the mispachas, the covering of the Torah, is part of the Torah, but it's not part of Torah study. You can't study the Torah covering. It's part of the physical Torah. So you lose the mitzvah of holding the physical Torah. Torah study is not physical. You don't do it with your hands. You do it with your mind and with your eyes. So why should the two be connected and therefore you separate them out? You lose the mitzvah of holding the Torah, but the mitzvah of Torah study counts. I'm reading from column 3. However, when we start saying that the cover of the Torah is literally part of Torah, apparently on this way of thinking, just like a person's body becomes part of his soul, every physical part of the Torah, not just the actual words, but the margins and the Eitz Chaims and the covering, the whole kit and caboodle. It's a helikateta. It becomes one inseparable, indivisible entity, and therefore this is not just part of the physical Torah. It's part of everything about Torah. And now you can't divide it. It's like a gegambet matzah. It's like a stolen matzah. You're holding the Torah the wrong way. There's no Torah study either. There's nothing. You'll lose everything. Now comes the beautiful closing of the Sicha. And the Rebbe translates all the above into spiritual. In Avodah, let's call it. The Rebbe says, I just copied the first two columns from before, but now we have the spiritual application column. The Rebbe says this part of the Sicha is based on the fact that at the end of the Masechta, after it says this whole discussion, after it says these whole four opinions that we talked about, there's a discussion there that says, the Tosfos. The Tosfos. After the Tosfos says what he says, remember he's the one who divides opinion 3 and 4. Tosfos adds and closes with this, that if you hold it, he says, you got to hold it with the covering, and without the covering, it's terrible, and you actually lose the whole mitzvah of Torah study, as we said. However, the Tosfos finishes, if you do hold it with the covering, you have long life on the right side, and on the left side, you have wealth and honor. And that's how Tosfos finishes the Masechta, the tractate. And the Rebbe says, some might say he just wants to finish in a positive way, but why would he bring in a whole new pasuk and a whole new subject? He could have finished that if you hold it with the covering, you get the mitzvah of the reading. Why does he have to bring in? The Rebbe doesn't accept that he's just being flowery to end in a positive way. And the Rebbe says that when it says that Torah has long life on its right and wealth and honor on the left, he brings down from the Gemara, from our Chazal. Now, what does it mean, the right? Those who study Torah lishma, for its own sake. That's long life. What does it mean on the left? Those who study Torah not for its own sake. Now, that doesn't mean that he's studying Torah in an unkosher way, studying it just because he wants to get honor or some stupid thing. But he's studying Torah less than for its own sake. Namely, what is it considered in the Chazal, in the writings of our sages? One who studies Torah just to know the mitzvahs. Oh, it's very important to know the mitzvahs. And that would probably be the first and foremost thing you should do, is study Torah to know the mitzvahs. But that's the left side, because it's not lishma. It's not really about Torah. A higher level is Torah study for its own sake. Again, you got to study what you need to know. But then Torah study is the greatest mitzvah in and of itself, just to study Torah, not because I want to know what to do, just because it's Hashem's Torah. It's intimacy with God. It's the closest thing. It's the greatest thing. It's beyond knowing how to do a mitzvah. And that is how the Rebbe would explain, based on the Gemaras and this Tosfos, that the person, that there's the right side and the left side, whether you're studying Torah to know the mitzvahs or you're studying Torah just for its own sake. So the Rebbe now applies, you see. Now the Rebbe applies a spiritual application based on this. If you didn't follow the last 2 minutes, leave it alone. But now come back. So the Rebbe says, what would be levels 2, 3, and 4? Level 1 obviously means just the garments, it's external. Garments to the body. So I don't know if there's a spiritual application. Level 2, what does it mean? What's the analog? What's the spiritual application in our avodas Hashem, from the mitpachas, from the Torah's coverings? Mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are your coverings, as we said earlier. The mitzvah is not you. The mitzvah is something you do. But it's the garment to the person, to the soul. It's the garment to Torah, because it's the result of Torah. But there's something, let's call it, greater than a mitzvah. That's Torah. Because Torah is literally Hashem's wisdom. You see, when you do a mitzvah, it's Hashem commanded you, but now the mitzvah is something outside. It's like a garment to Hashem's Torah. It's a very tight garment and a strong expression. But the mitzvah is a physical thing outside of it. Torah study is literally Hashem's wisdom. But in Torah study itself, we have 2 levels. We have, I could study Torah for the sake of mitzvahs, you see. So if the mitzvah is the garment, the Torah study for the sake of mitzvahs is, no, it's not mitzvahs. It's actual Torah. I'm studying Torah. So in the analog, this would mean that that my Torah covering, namely my study of Torah, is for the sake of mitzvahs. It's part of the actual Torah. I'm studying Torah. But you can't say that I'm really studying the soul of Torah. I'm studying it for the sake of a practical use. So I know what to do. That's like the middle level. And the highest level is Torah study for its own sake. I know that in Torah is Hashem's wisdom and Hashem's delight. And I just want to be one with Hashem and as the greatest closeness possible to Hashem. So this becomes levels 2, 3, and 4. Again, level 2 is mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are great, but they're a Torah covering on this level, that it's a covering to the Torah. It gives respect to the Torah. It's more than that. It gives expression to the Torah, but it's not the Torah. full disclosure, there's other places in Chassidus which says the mitzvahs have an edge over Torah. But in this context, Torah is the greatest thing. So the mitzvah is not the Torah. It gets respect. It expresses the Torah. Then we say, no. On level 3 is a person is studying Torah. But he's studying Shulchan Aruch, he's studying Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he's studying laws so that he knows what to do. Here he's graduated and he's actually involved with Torah, like level 3. He's dealing with the trimming still. He's doing the Torah coverings. He's busy with mitzvahs. But these Torah coverings now have gone into the realm of Torah study because he's studying to know what to do. So now the covering has become part of the Torah. How great is that? But it's become part of the Torah, but not into the essence of Torah. He's studying Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. He's studying Halakha. He's got one foot in the world of mitzvahs and one foot in the world of Torah. It's like a Torah covering that's part of Torah, but it's not Torah. He's not. You can't say that his world is the ultimate yichud oneness with Hashem that Torah study accomplishes. He's focused more on the mitzvahs aspect of Torah study. Then comes the highest level that a person learns Torah Lishma. He is learning Torah because he knows that this is Hashem's wisdom and delight, and it's unbelievable. It's a lakus, it's a live wire of a lakus, as per Tanya Perek Hey, and therefore every moment of Torah study, he's pasha intimate with God. It's extraordinary. So therefore, his Torah study is completely one with Hashem, and there's nothing external about it. So the Rebbe is concluding the Sicha and saying the following, that Tosfos is telling us here, and this closing of the Masechta Megillah is teaching us, that if I learn Torah properly, which means I learn it for the sake of not just to know, if I learn Torah like only to know what to do. This is the Rebbe's overlay on the Tosfos. I'm learning Torah, but my focus is only to know rules. I'm lacking Torah study for its own sake. I got a covering. But I don't have the actual Torah. I'm missing something. Conversely, if I study Torah Lishma for its own sake, now I have the actual soul of the Torah. But the Rebbe says here an interesting thing, and this becomes to me the takeaway of the Sicha. That if you look at it in face value, it could look like the Rebbe is concluding that the focus should be just on Torah study. Don't focus on Torah study even for the sake of mitzvahs, because that's at the highest level. Focus on Torah study itself. It's true. There's a certain edge to that. But the language of the Sicha, the lesson of the Sicha is that I'm holding the mitpachas, I'm covering of the Torah. When is my Torah study wholesome? Only if I'm also studying it for the sake of knowing the laws. If I study it for the sake of knowing the laws, and I'm also studying it for its own sake, I have both. That's how Tosfos concludes it. I have the right and the left. I'm studying Torah because I want to know the laws. And I'm studying Torah also because of the soul of Torah. Then I have everything. But if I hold the Torah without its covering, what does it mean in our conversation? I hold the Torah without its covering means I'm studying Torah, but I'm not learning the laws that I need to know what to practice, right? And the spiritual application, the covering means the study of Torah to know the laws. I'm skipping that piece. I'm just studying Torah, Lishma, I'm learning a lot of Gemara, I'm learning a lot of Chassidus, but I'm not learning the Halakha, and I don't have in mind to practice what I'm learning. And I'm not learning in order to practice. What does that mean? It's akin to holding the Torah, studying it, but there's no mental, there's no covering. According to level 4, not only am I missing out on the mitzvah of holding Torah, I'm missing out on the whole learning of Torah. Because if I learn Torah without the intention of practice, it will affect my learning of Torah as well. This is reminiscent. This, to me, is the takeout of the Sicha in the end. That the Sicha speaks about Torah coverings. Torah coverings at a spiritual level means to learn Torah for the sake of mitzvahs. What is even higher than that? Torah study for its own sake. Yes. Which one should you do? Both. What happens if you hold the Torah without its covering? Translation in this context. You learn Torah, but you don't bother learning it in order to practice it. You don't have the covering. So on one level, level 3, you're missing that piece. Altered to a higher level, level 4, if you're missing the covering, you're missing the practical application, you're not learning in order to practice and to do mitzvahs and become a better yid in practice, you're not going to be able to learn Torah either. You're going to miss out on that too. It's just not going to work. It doesn't work. Torah doesn't work learning without Maisa. This reminiscent of a Sicha, where the Rabbi says that they would light the menorah from the flame of the Mizbeach, the altar. The menorah is inside. It represents Torah study, the highest levels of Kedusha. The Mizbeach is outside in the courtyard. It represents mitzvahs. They would bring sacrifices. It's a much lower level of Kedusha. It's outside. However, the flame of the menorah would come from the Mizbeach. And the Rebbe says if a person thinks they're going to become a big Talmid Chacham and they're not going to bother doing mitzvahs, about giving other people mitzvahs on the outside, but even the concept of doing mitzvahs, the focus is not like Pirkei Avos says, Amanas Lases, he learns in order to do, or learns in order, God forbid, he doesn't care about doing the mitzvahs. He's missing the outside flame. He'll never have the menorah flame. And I believe strongly that this is also here the end takeaway of the lesson. If I understand spiritual application of level 2, 3, and 4 is mitzvahs. Torah study for the sake of mitzvahs and Torah study for its own sake. What now becomes translation of 3 and 4? I'm holding the Torah without its covering. I'm studying Torah, but I'm not studying about the mitzvahs. I'm not about to do mitzvahs. I'm missing the covering. Here we say you're going to miss out on something important. And on level 4, actually your whole Torah study will be flawed, which obviously very much in line with the Rebbe's approach and Chassidus. At the end of the day, it has to be Nasa ben Ishma, and the focus has to be to do what Hashem wants, and the Torah study is part of that as well.